Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nomiki Show. It is Wednesday, January 12th, 2022. And if you don't know, if you haven't checked out the show before and you haven't heard us say this over and over, November is it's like 10 months away. And why does November matter? I am not letting this go. November are the elections, the midterms. And if you recall, a man named George W. Bush basically stole an election in 2000. And Al Gore didn't really fight back in the way that I think so many Democrats and progressives thought he could have and would have won. Al Gore lost his home state. Al Gore lost an election many people thought he would win, and the Democrats did very little to try to win back, even though they probably had the ability to do so. And then 4 years later, John Kerry. John Kerry was swift-boated by a guy who was a cheerleader who was not an actual military officer. John Kerry, of course, was a veteran of Vietnam. He testified against Vietnam, 50 years ago at this point. And somehow they manipulated the media into thinking that John Kerry was a liar and he wasn't a military hero because they knew at that time the Republicans needed to appear strong, and John Kerry couldn't appear stronger than George W. Bush. And once again, the Democrats lost by a narrow margin in Ohio. That was it. It was Ohio, Ohio, Ohio. And that led to their very thoughtful, strategic goal of taking over the entire country. The Koch brothers, of course, were on top of this, a decade and a half before George W. Bush got elected. But once George W. Bush got elected, even if it was by the tiniest of margins, they did everything they could by stacking the courts, taking over legislatures, and really sealing the deal for at least a decade. Except there was one thing. The Bushes did not get along with the far right. And the far right was taking advantage of the fact that the grounds had been laid by the Koch brother infrastructure and the Bushes being in office, the Bush being in office, meaning George W. Bush. And so they saw it as an opportunity. George W. Bush, let's just remind everybody, pre-Ellen, baseball games and pre-Michelle Obama embrace, George W. Bush was the least popular president of all time. So much so that Junior Senator Barack Obama could run for office as the anti-war candidate, the anti-Iraq war candidate in a primary against institutional figure Hillary Clinton. Okay? So this is a situation in which you had the least popular president of all time, George W. Bush, create an opening for Democrats to come in and win. And just in the nick of time, they chose John McCain, who was sort of sidelined because he was independent. He was not lockstep with the Republican Party at all times. And so they said, oh, he's earned because it's about ranks in the Republican Party. Okay, we will put John McCain as our nominee because it's likely, based on historic trends, that we're going to lose. So we might as well give him his moment. Okay? So they brought in John McCain, and then the economy collapses. And John McCain picks Sarah Palin. Perfect storm. And Barack Obama, of course, charismatic, and at that point had won the primary against Hillary Clinton on an anti-war message. He won the election. And we thought, all right, we'll get through this. We get through the economy. We will get through this. And of course, we know where it went from there. Barack Obama, of course, not only didn't just bail out Wall Street, but he pulled funds from the Democratic Party, and there was a shellacking. And the shellacking is the moment I want to come to. The shellacking were the midterm elections. Historically, but really not historically in the last 60, 70 years, it's more historically since 1992. Have the midterms been catastrophic? And I say that because the Democrats held the House for 30 years prior to Bill Clinton winning the presidency. So now we're expected in less than 11 short months to lose the House and the Senate. Because of historic trends. That's the excuse, historic trends. Well, historic trends prior to Bill Clinton winning the White House were that the Democrats just had the House at all times. They never lost it. They just had it. And sometimes they had the Senate, but more often than not, the Democrats were in power because the Democrats were there for working people. But somehow we are a more progressive, diverse country than ever, and we have no middle class left, and somehow the Democrats aren't able to keep their majority based on the principles that they fight for. So what I am here to share with you all today is we cannot rest on the Democrats. Yes, they're infuriating. And yes, the establishment, their leadership is completely asleep at the wheel and beholden to capital and Wall Street and the powers that be and their donors. But it doesn't mean that we need to rely on them. In 2017, as you guys know, I was on the Unity Reform Commission, and we spent 2 years traveling around the country, meeting with different party leaders, trying to figure out how to fix the Democratic Party. We issued a report. We got it voted on by the entire DNC. It won, and they did not institute any of our recommendations. And those recommendations primarily were, hey, maybe you should take your money and pull them away from 5 consultants and put them into state parties and build a pipeline of candidates and folks who can help out these campaigns, because that's what the Republicans have been doing for 40 years. We've lost unions. They're nowhere near what they used to be in 1978 since we banned them from the party. So now we have to do something more. And so what I'm saying to you, and I will continue to say, and this is the theme of our show, is the Proud Boys are running, the QAnon supporters are running, the Boogaloo Boys are running at the local level. This is much, much more than the Koch brothers and the Bush family dynasty. This is about the far right taking over. And if the establishment Democrats can't even get BBB passed when they have the House, the Senate, and the presidency, then it's time for us all to step up. If you've ever thought about running for local office, this is your time. Run for city council, town council, school board, state senate, assembly. It's much more achievable than the bigger. Congress is great, but Congress is stalled. If you want to run for Congress, please do so. But it's not just about bad Democrats anymore. It's about actually challenging these far-right members, because the Democrats are not present. They are not present in 50 states in this country. They don't have operational Democratic parties recruiting candidates and training them. So we ask you to run. And we are going to do whatever we can on our show and other shows to help inform you on how to run. We don't deserve to be going into the dark ages, but we can't sit here and say we do not have the power to do something.